Okay. Let me give you a little announcement before we start. We have a workshop, January 28th, 2017, which is like a couple months from now. We have Bob D. and Adrian C. coming in from New York City, and Bob D. is coming in from Las Vegas, Nevada. It will be free. It will be here all day on a Saturday. If you go to our Conscious Contact speaker group on Facebook, you'll be able to follow all the listings of things we have and activities. Right now, I'm going to hand this over to Tim to get this started, because you guys look anxious. The flyers will be here next week, too.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speakers Group of AA. I am Tim, and I am an alcoholic. Hey, this is a one-hour speaker meeting that lasts every Saturday. It meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church here at 301 North Main Street, Doylestown, Pennsylvania, every Saturday, 8:30 p.m. The purpose of our group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. We do record all of our speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of AA. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone in the room tonight from out of town or would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Sir. Brian, welcome. Yes, sir.
My name's Colin. I'm alcoholic.
Colin, welcome. Glad to have you. Yes, sir.
I'm Andy. I'm an alcoholic.
Andy, welcome. Sir.
I'm Alan, and I'm an alcoholic.
Alan, welcome. Sir.
My name's Greg, and I'm an alcoholic.
Greg, welcome. Glad to have you. Sir, right here.
Jimmy, alcoholic.
Jimmy, welcome.
Joe, alcoholic.
Joe, welcome.
Hey, John Ray, alcoholic.
Don Ray, nice to have you guys. Yes.
I'm Charles, and I'm an alcoholic.
Charles, welcome. Man means it. Yes, sir.
My name's Tony.
Tony, welcome, sir. Yes. Welcome, Sir Brian, welcome. Very good. That's excellent. The Conscious Contact Group here does encourage sponsorship, so would anyone who has a working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hand now. Fantastic. If you're just starting the program looking for a sponsor, those hands are a lifeline for you. Are there any announcements tonight for the good of AA? In the back, there's all kinds of flyers. Please remember Ron's message about the workshop. We have meeting lists and we have big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting if you would like one. If you can't afford one, we can make one available to you at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations to help with that, there's a little bucket in the back. You can drop a few bucks in there as well. If you'd like a CD of tonight's speaker or any other speaker who's been present here, please see me or Ron. They are also available at no charge. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Anthony, who will be reading tonight's AA preamble.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is now not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And I've asked Bill to come up and read the AA 12 Steps of Recovery.
Thanks for reading.
Good evening, I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Bill.
These are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
We do have a 7th tradition here. The 7th tradition is that every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we'd like to pass the baskets on either side of the auditorium. As you well know, we have no dues or fees. However, we do have expenses. Coffee creamers, donuts, all that kind of good stuff. I would like to mention that there is absolutely no smoking on church property. Take it across the street to the Dairy Queen. Also, while you're filling the basket, please take a moment and pull out your cell phones and either hit the mute button or turn the sound off, or even better yet, turn them off for the next hour so there aren't any interruptions at all for our speaker. It is a pleasure tonight to introduce our speaker this evening. As you well know, the reputation of the epic speakers that we have here on Saturdays probably does fill some people with a bit of trepidation when they get here, but I have no fear that this young lady will do a fantastic job. Tonight, we are lucky to have her on loan from the Pathway to Power. She comes tonight to us from Westchester, New York, Ms. Linnea W.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm known as Linnea Danielle Kinnan Wexler. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and my sobriety date is March 17th, 2009. And I love being sober. And I'm so grateful to be here tonight. What a special experience this has been so far. I have to say, Ron, thank you so much for inviting me to come. Now, I've been across the fellowship in a lot of different countries and many different places. But this place has a very special energy to it. It's almost like fairy tale gingerbread, sing-song quality, and which I think is quite a bit to say about a group full of alcoholics. So I was really happy to see so many new hands in the beginning of the meeting as well. This is the fellowship that set me on a path that awakened my heart and set me free. And Dr. Bob, in his farewell address, said, our 12 steps, when simmered down to the last, resolve themselves into the words love and service. And I really hope to convey that to you tonight. So there are 3 Zen students all sitting and talking about their teachers. And the first student says, my spiritual master is so spiritual that he can go days without eating. And the second student says, my master is so spiritual, he can go days without sleeping. And the third student says, my master is so spiritual, he eats when he's hungry and sleeps when he's tired. So I think that there really is an important marriage between practicality and spirituality. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about my experience tonight, a little bit about my story with the common problem and with our common solution. And a common solution is a curious thing, because across the rooms we can hear a lot of things that address, right, that people talking about what will address alcoholism. But actually, the common solution that I'm going to be talking about is the program of recovery is laid out in the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I grew up in Rockland County, New York. My mother is from northern Sweden, from right below the Arctic Circle. She's a university professor. My father was a Jew from the Bronx. He was a psychologist and became president of the New York State Psychological Association over all the thousands of psychologists. And I also had 17 Swedish au pairs and a nanny from Oklahoma. And so it was absolutely an interesting childhood with a lot of opportunities and also a lot of dysfunction. I qualified for Mensa, the International High IQ Society, by the time I was 4. And when I was 6, I had a powerful experience in my life where I was attacked in the face by an Akita, which is a Japanese guard dog. And I wasn't able to get proper help for hours, and I was hearing that I was going to die, and I closed my eyes, and as I was sort of passing into, unconsciousness, I found my peace. And I've never forgotten that, but while there were lots of amazing things through my childhood, my father had a very rough childhood, and so one of the things that he wanted to do was to toughen me up. And so he taught me to fight, and he put me into martial arts, and so I had a black belt by the time I was 9. But he was the one mostly fighting me. And so I didn't understand alcoholism at the time, but my father is alcoholic. And my mother and father had gone to treatment together, and my mom had said at some point as they were leaving that they had said to my father, "You have no recovery." But I don't know if that's true because my mother was an Al-Anon dropout. But because things were so rough, by the time I was 12, I really felt at such a loss, and I was praying to God for help. But help didn't come in the way and the time that I thought that it would. And so I decided that I was alone in this world. And I stayed atheist and then agnostic for the next 17 years. Now, the first time I got drunk, it just rang right through me. I had an abnormal physiological reaction to alcohol from the very first time I drank, and I tumbled through the rabbit hole of a bottomless bottle, and I liked me so much more when I drank. And I liked you so much more when I drank, and my problems didn't seem to matter so much. Now, I thought as the years went on that I was drinking like everybody else. I thought it was part of the college culture. And I wanted to discover things. I wanted to, understand what the writers and the artists, found that was bigger out there, because I did feel like something was missing. Now, I do believe that I was alcoholic by my teens, and when I was 19 years old, I had such a severe inability to stop once I started that I drank so much I could have died and was unceremoniously left in front of an emergency room. And I felt like, upon reflection, that there was like a flap broken, some sort of a stopping point that seemed to be missing for me. But I didn't think I'm never going to drink anymore. That wasn't an option. The idea was, I'm never going to do that again. And I believed that I would be able to control my drinking. But I was failing miserably. And I had gotten into the Ivy League. I didn't go to Cornell because I heard that they had the highest suicide rate in the country. My thinking was out. But I studied political theory and government. And after college, I wound up with, I had a passion for propaganda. And I was given opportunities to study in the Loire Valley in France and in Boston. and I fell in love with the arts. And the arts took me, and I had studied in London, and I'd been backpacking, throwing my way up across Europe. And I wound up being given an opportunity to study in Florence, Italy for a year with an Italian monument designer and artist in his private studio. And my drinking really increased. I was young, I had a bunch of money, and I went from 1 flask to 2 to the whole bottle and my tumbler in tow. And years later, when I would crawl into the rooms, I didn't understand alcoholism, and I was trying to figure out what was wrong with my thinking, and I made a list of all of my favorite drinks, and I had 110 of them, because what I would do is I would drive, take one, go with it and drive it into the ground, and then that must be the problem, and hit the next one. And I had been experimenting with all sorts of things. Now, people started catching on to my drinking, so what I decided to do was to try to control it in a way that I had never done before. And I went back to New York after a year, and I was applying to graduate schools, to Harvard and to Yale, and all the hardest schools that I could find, and I was losing my mind. I felt like I had tumbled from heaven into the pricker bushes, and I wanted to die every single day, and I didn't know how to fix what was within. I had an apartment in in New York City, a studio apartment, which I used for 6 hours in the course of a year, to sober up. I was working for my dad's company, and then I wasn't functioning that way anymore, and so I became the gardener, and I wasn't functioning that way anymore, and so I had an opportunity to go back to Florence, and I had been dating somebody, an Italian man, and he flew me back out, and he was much like me. He drank like me, but we were still able to build a beautiful looking life together at that time. And so I was living in this 700-year-old Florentine palazzo in the library, frescoed full of angels. And we had opened a wrought iron design studio together. And so that was good, because later, had we not had our own business, I would have been unemployable. And so on the mind can make a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell. Well, I got sicker and sicker in paradise. And so year by year, the illness progressed like clockwork. And every summer we would go to the beaches of the south of Italy in Calabria for 4 to 6 weeks, and I would try to use that as some sort of a turning point, after which I would fail. And so I was going from a socialite to an isolator, and I thought there were 1,000 things wrong with me. I thought that it was, I thought I was depressed. I thought I was anxious. I thought my problem was panic attacks. I thought my problem was, the family that I'd grown up with. And I don't think that caused my alcoholism. I think that the trauma was used by my illness. I don't think that that's the origin of the illness. I thought, and I was going to the doctors and the psychologists and the psychiatrists and the homeopaths, and I, was put on some turquoise machine with my fingers and these little clamps and these little windshield wipers, and I stopped eating eggplant. But I didn't know how to be okay sober. And so because I was so ashamed, I put all the pretty things up on Facebook, but I was dying. And I went from a socialite to an isolator. So every year things got worse now, and the things that they were giving me were making me sicker. And the very last time we went to Calabria before I got sober, we went to the beaches and we were driving back up to Florence, and I said, not one, never again. And I really meant it, not one more time. And we got back to the apartment, and 10 minutes later I said, okay, just one more time. But I really meant just one. And I went into a 6-month day and night binge. And I had everything that I thought I wanted, because I didn't have to work if I didn't want to, and everything was set up for me, and I was dying from the inside out. I had lost everything that I thought that I loved about life. And I had, at the end of this 6 months, I was 29 years old. I felt like I was 129. My body was breaking down. I'm watching like senior citizens run marathons on television, and I think, I don't even know how to get out of bed. You know, how are you doing this? I asked people questions that didn't make any sense to them because it wouldn't make sense to someone who hadn't had this experience. And so, but what happened was the mountains didn't crumble, like the whole earth didn't shatter, but within something happened. I had a moment of light, like a moment of clarity. And the way it came to me was that I'd given all of my power away to something that didn't deserve it. And I thought that I would be able to lock myself in my apartment and sober up and then get on with the rest of my life as if none of that had ever happened. And I literally, for weeks, was in that apartment, and I watched the dust settle around me. Now, from day one, in my bed, I was in a place where I was so mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically bankrupt that I started praying to the air for help. And to my great surprise, a loving power came flooding into my life. And I didn't know if I could trust this because I knew from what I was experiencing in that moment that I had been insane. And so I wasn't sure if I could really rely on this, except that I felt when I heard this voice come from inside that it was always loving, and it was always caring, and it was always true. And so I wound up looking online, and I was still in Florence, Italy at that time, and I wound up looking online, and I said, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time with this. And they said, you should go to meetings. And I was like, okay, you don't know who I am. I'm so glad that works for you. But I would sort of Google Earth into like the front of the meeting places, and I wound up walking over there eventually. And some of the meetings I would walk to, and the others I was riding a stolen folding bicycle. I didn't steal it, but I knew it was stolen. You know, about an hour in each direction, you know, coming back at midnight, you know, through the winter, because I really didn't want to die. And I knew that if I drank again, I would. Now, I didn't want to be alcoholic. And the first question that I had when I was going to the fellowship, the real reason I went was to find out what an alcoholic is. And I found out all kinds of, or people told me all different kinds of things about, you know, oh, it was how, you know, it's how you drank, or when you drank, or how much you drank, or how you felt when you drank, or the consequences when you drank. But no, it took a while until I found somebody who could actually translate the illness to me so simply. And I went in and I said, you know, I'd like to buy all the literature, and I want to take all the steps. I need a sponsor, and I'm ready to go. And they said, no. You know, I was discouraged away from it. That's not how this works. Well, I wound up, I think because of the willingness and the alignment of my heart to want to get better, I found a sponsor after months who was in the UK. And they were 19 years sober, and I didn't know this was the best person that I had. They were so intent on watching out for me, but I actually didn't know if they believed they were a cat. Okay, that's a true story. Like, I picked up the phone and they say meow, you know, but it was my best bet. And so they were very, very loving, and I'm so grateful for their fellowship. And we started doing these worksheets on the steps. And I went on a wild goose chase that I didn't know how to do better on. And I was defining words like a and thee and we. And I was powerless over the weather. And after a year, I had about 100 typewritten pages for the first, what I thought were the first 3 steps. And I was getting ready for my 4th step, what I believed it was, you know, something that we were making up combined with other stuff that we were making up. And then I put together these 3 1-inch binders with chronological, you know, order of my life. And I sat down to deal with my first resentment, and 7 pages. And 2 hours later, with tears on the page and a phone call to my sponsor, I had 1 resentment. And I thought, this is gonna take like years. And I'm so glad that at a year sober, someone came into my life to challenge basically everything I thought I knew about recovery. And I'm so grateful that they had the courage to do that. Now, the first conversation didn't go very well. And they had, but I knew I needed more help than I had, because I had gone back to New York and maybe 9 months sober, and all of this stuff had come back up since getting sober, and I was confused, and I presented this to my family, and it went horribly wrong. And so, I had all these resentments and no amends in tow. And so, the next time this person saw me, his name was Alan. And when women can work with women, it's better, and when men can work with men, it's better. But I was in a situation where I was willing to work with anybody. And Alan came up to me and he said, he made amends, not for what he had said, but for how he had said it. And he took me out for coffee. And he started talking about alcoholism, and I thought, this is the first person I think I've ever met in my life who understands alcoholism and its treatment. And I felt like I was connected to like real deal AA. I just knew it in my heart. And he talked about going out to, really live, and leaving his 10-year medallion on the top of Mont Blanc, and dancing on the beaches of Bali at 5 in the morning. And that was so different from everything that I had heard, where, I couldn't go to, my daughter's wedding at 20 years sober because there's going to be alcohol there. And so he told me that he would take me through the work and it wouldn't take a lot of time. And my sponsor and I sort of laughed at it until I said, I'm going to learn something. And we went through the work together. And he took me to the Excelsior, and I felt like I was lifted back into, into humankind. And we sat down with the book, and I had read the book myself, but I didn't really get it. I had related to we agnostics, but I didn't understand that the directions for the steps were in the big book. And we sat down, and he was brilliant about it. And he started by working with the ego. And he said to me things like, I'm going to help make you a great sponsor. And I thought, yeah, like a couple of years from now. But it would happen that, just days after getting through the work, all of a sudden I knew what AA was, and I had a personal experience with it, and I turned around and was working with somebody else. And so, but we started going through the book, and he showed me what's there, what alcoholism is, and he shared with me his personal experience, and he streamlined the process. And it rang right with my heart. And that the two distinctions that make alcoholics different from all other people is, number one, an abnormal reaction at the level of the body. When I put alcohol into my body, it sets off a phenomenon of craving, and I will lose control of the amount I take. And I should be able to set that down and get on with the rest of my life free and undisturbed, except that there is a second abnormal component, which is an abnormal condition of the mind, like a strange form of insanity that would always send me back to a drink, despite the greatest necessity or wish not to drink. So if I have a mind that won't allow me to stop and stay stopped, and a body that won't allow me to control the amount I take, I'm in a closed circuit. And it's an illness that is progressive in nature. And if I can get that down to my innermost self, down to my core level, like down to the cells, that on my own power, I am doomed. That's actually a gift. Because like a man running out of air, it is lack of power, right? The true experience, not an intellectual exercise, but the experience of lack of power that creates the drive for power. So step one is telling me that, it's an admission that I have the illness and an understanding of what that illness is. There is no hope in step one. Step one tells me lack of power is my dilemma. And the second step tells me the solution must be power. And I didn't understand what the steps were, but they are a formula of spiritually based actions meant to clear the channels between me and experience of the power that has been here all along. And so we went into the work, and I couldn't believe how simple it was and how effective. And we went into the second step, and it's, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? And to me, the words are important, but the principles are really what it's about. It's fingers pointing to the moon, And we went into the third step, and I'd been atheist and agnostic for all of that time, and now we have this, this discussion. We're going from belief to faith, but if I really get that powerlessness is my problem, I become willing and open-minded to all kinds of things that I wasn't willing and open-minded to before. And he started talking to me about things like faith. And he said, Linny, what's 40% faith? It's not faith. What's 60% faith? It's not faith. What's 80% faith? It's not faith. What's 98% faith? It's not faith. And it's in that 2% I'm really going to need God. And so I made a decision to be all in and go through the rest of the steps. Now, I'm really grateful that my sponsor sat there with me as we went through the inventory and started getting me on the path, without delay. And we sat there as I started writing, and he would ask me reflexive questions, like, has anybody ever stolen anything from you? Oh, yeah. Have you ever stolen anything from anybody else? Oh, has anybody ever cheated on you? Okay, yeah. Have you ever cheated on anybody? Okay, And we were going through this work, and he said, and he sent me home, and he said, I'll see you tomorrow with a completed inventory. And I was like, what? Right? That is supposed to take years. But he was an English yacht captain in a night, and I was afraid that he was going to leave Viareggio, and so I went home and I worked all night long until about 10 in the morning, and he said, are you ready? I said, I'm not done. And I slept a couple of hours, and I did this. This is just my personal experience. It's not a better than less. This is just what happened. And then we did this for about 4 or 5 days. And at the end of that, I had over 800 resentments and the fear and the sex inventory. I was very sick with this stuff, and I knew that these resentments were killing me, but I hadn't been able to get free from them. And I knew that I had a mind that I couldn't shut off, that I needed an iPod for, iPod at the time, day and night, because I was tired of thinking, about Marco Alverio and what he said about my pants in 3rd grade. But we went through this work, and 2 hours after I was done writing the inventory, we went into a 5th step. And it blew my mind, because I was so ready for him to zone out and not be present to all this stuff that I thought was I was so shame-based that I was going to get set on fire or, something like this. But he didn't. He was present, and thank goodness. Because he had been where I had been, and he had thought like I thought, and felt like I felt, and drank like I drank, and he helped me to rip up my previous experience of the world and send it back again in a way that was beautiful, that channeled power, that gave me insights that had been impossible, that put me into a place of purpose, of being able to see things in a way that I had never seen them before. And my experience with a thorough 4th step, a real deal 4th step, is that it had me running to a real deal 5th step. And a real deal 5th step had me running into the willingness to be free from the things that were keeping me sick and hurting myself and others. And the same thing happened. A real deal 6th step had me running into the 7th step, prayer. And I already had the 8th step with me because he had written it with me while we were going through the inventory. Did you harm this person? Yeah, and I got to check these names. And it means that it didn't take a long time to get through a process that wasn't designed to take years or even months. It can be done in weeks, in days. And change that had been impossible no matter how much I wanted it. And so when we went into the 9th step, he sent me home to make amends that day. My first amend that day. And I'm so grateful, because there was a huge emphasis on making amends in my sponsorship lineage, because, it would have been very convenient for all of us in Italy or all of us in the south of France to say, sorry, I'm too far, can't make those, send a letter. What I learned was about making amends trips. Guess what? You got to Bali, you'll get back there. You know? Guess what? You want to do this for real? I made my amends trip. I crossed the Atlantic Ocean. I went back to my family. I went back to the people who had been, you know, my biggest resentments or places where I knew I had all this anger, guilt, and shame. And I went back and I took the actions that would set me free. Because it's one thing to get clear in here, right? But I need to go out to clean up the wreckage of my past, to get free out there, to be a woman free in the world. But it started getting exciting. And, you know, he said things like, we were going into the 10th step, you know, the practice as the watcher. And then through practices to discover myself as the light behind the watcher. And I had a night when I was looking through this 10th step on, you know, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And I thought, why these 4, right? Because they're very similar to the 4th step, selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear. And I had a revelation. It was, from the Oxford group. We don't have the 4 absolutes, but we have their opposites. And so all of a sudden, that gets translated not just into the 10th step, but also into the 11th, because what am I looking for? You know, these are the opposites, like absolute unselfishness versus selfishness, absolute honesty versus dishonesty, absolute purity, which is just pure between my mind and my heart, you know, lack of disturbance versus, you know, resentment, absolute love versus fear. And the concept being, if it's coming from these absolutes, it's probably coming from God. And if it's coming from the opposites, it's probably coming from self. And there's a paradox in dealing with self, right? Because we see selfishness, self-centeredness as the root of our troubles. And then we see also in the book, you know, and in finding God, he found himself. Well, what are we talking about? And the way I see it is, it's the destruction of the false sense of self, right? Getting free from that and connection to the authentic self. And what starts to happen in here? Well, I had been a permanent taker because I just didn't have the power to do anything else. I could barely take care of me, let alone help you. And all of a sudden, I'm being set onto a way of living and a flow of power where I am here to be of service to you. But going into the 11th step, you know, so growing in understanding and effectiveness and establishing an active growing relationship with this power that's come through. And I was set into one of the most exciting things that I've been on, and I have been in here for years, and I love it, and it's spiritual kindergarten. And it was the end of wholesale condemnation, and all of a sudden I was told, you know, go into places where people have a relationship with God and look for what's beautiful. And I do that every day. I have spiritual teachers over here and these over there, and I'm not afraid anymore about your relationship with God, you know? And I started having also from there all kinds of like blow your hair back experiences where it's about being present. Because how could I have been present if my resentments are pulling me into the past and the fears are pulling me into the future? But I get to be here in the moment, alive, where God really is. And in a relationship with intuition and inspiration, it gets exciting. And then we went around and I was able to help find somebody right away who I knew would be interested in doing the work when we went through the 12-step. And my sponsor was very clever, and he took me and the other person, and we sat down together and took him through the steps, and that helped to reinforce the process for me. And then I went to the next person and took, you know, Gerardo with me, and we went to Maurice, and so forth. And I just had the most incredible, unbelievable experiences watching people recover before my eyes, where the eyes light up. And you stand different, and I had somebody who brought in, you know, photo albums of his family and the grandkids and and it was like, wait, it's not just the alcoholic. There's a butterfly effect. We're given such a gift. And I had such a powerful experience at that time. I said, you know, more power flowing through than I could even believe. Like, there you have the sun, and here it feels like it's 20,000 times brighter than the sun. Now, it was amazing, and I had quite a lot to learn. And so one of the things is growing in understanding and effectiveness, my relationship, for example, to selfishness and dishonesty and self-seeking and fear was going to keep increasing. And now I had been with this Italian man for 9 years, and I thought that we were getting sober together, and unfortunately we didn't, and he just went to hiding it. So after a year sober, I wound up leaving. However, I wound up moving to the south of France with my sponsor, where I got engaged. And it's true. But it is such a serious thing, and I didn't understand at the time what that would really mean. I didn't really understand or have the same perspective on how this illness works. And at 16 years sober, 2 weeks shy of 16 years sober, he went back out. And we were living in a dream home in the south of France, and he started losing his mind, and I didn't know what to do, and I still had hope because he was coming in and going back out, and I had never intended to live in France, and so what I did was I leaned harder into God. I leaned harder into the book. I leaned harder into prayer and meditation, and I leaned harder into working with others. And I got to work with people from all around the world, from South Africa to New Zealand, Switzerland, Monaco, Ireland, England, Scotland, from New York to LA. And it was good for both of us. And at some point I was given an opportunity. Now I had taught myself to cook drunk in my pajamas, and I was given an opportunity to work on a yacht as a stewardess for a party. And the owner had me come back on my own, and he said, would you mind making lunch? And I was like, I'm not a professional. He's like, don't worry about it. And so I made lunch, and he's like, what? He's like, this is incredible. Can you come back tomorrow and do that again? And so I wound up becoming chef to that yacht. And then I got some training, and I became chef to on the yacht of an English lord for his family, friends, and business associates. And the lotus does not grow on marble, it blossoms in the mud. And I'm blossomed in a mud puddle because of this program. And I want to say there is a difference between the program and the fellowship. A lot of the people say, oh, I've been in the program for such and such a time, but they mean the fellowship, they mean going to meetings. To me, the fellowship is the people, right? The people, the meetings, sponsorship, going out for coffee, very important. There are things that happen in fellowship that just don't happen anywhere else. Is the power of one alcoholic working with another. And then there's the program. And the program is the 12 steps as laid out in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And to me, the ideal is the marriage. The marriage of both. There's power that happens between the two. But so I wound up being given an opportunity then to work as the second chef on a brand new $100 million yacht in Monaco. And I went on, and it was the gift of desperation again. And so I was praying, God, what do I do with these tomatoes? I've got a new employer. And I wind up being given this promotion on the second day. And I had, what I call the moment. I was standing on the helicopter landing pad of one of the largest yachts at the Monaco Yacht Show as the head chef to a German billionaire and 16 crew, with tears streaming down my cheeks, going, how did I get here, right? I'm an alcoholic, right? Because there is no way for me to have gotten from where I was to where I went without God. And so my partner was coming in and going back out. I wound up leaving and went back to Italy, and he came back months and months later and had lost absolutely everything and was insane, and the dream homes were gone, the Alfa Romeo was gone, the motorcycles are gone, the reputation is gone, and was busking for beer money on his knees. And I sat with him on park benches for months. he was too crazy and too dangerous at the time to come to stay with me. I was staying with somebody else. But we sat there like friends and we went through this because there wasn't anyone else who could go through this work, and he did get sober. I went back to work to put a roof over his head for the winter. And I wound up in all of these travels going to the most amazing places. Now, I had been in Corsica and Montenegro and the Greek islands, and Spain, a fellowship in Spain and France and Sardinia and Croatia. And when I went back to work, I crossed the Atlantic Ocean. I actually got injured in the south of France, but I didn't know how bad the injury was. But I crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and I want to say that it is because of this program, right, that I was able to stay sober through all of this rough stuff happening and being stuck at anchor for 6 weeks, And I knew that I could do it because I had been in a fellowship with other, because when I moved to the south of France, we were a very small but very big book strong group, which had actually been formed by a man who brought the big book to the south of France, who was being sponsored by Myers. And I wound up getting connected to a man in Dallas, Texas, whose name was Cliff, who just passed away this summer, who changed my life. And but I was out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean practicing these principles. And so there's no one who can tell me that there's anywhere you can go where this can't be done. And I wound up in South Florida, again in the fellowship, and I came up to New York because my father was dying. And while I was there, well, first of all, I want to say it changed everything because of amends. My relationship with him at that time, I had a purity in my heart. All I had for him genuinely in my heart was love. And he wasn't able to speak in the last 10 days of his, for 9 of the last 10 days of his life. The last day of his life he was, but he could write. And he wrote things like, Linnea, she's a good person. She has a good heart. She's X years sober. It was important to him. They didn't even know that I'd had a problem. And when I went back to make amends to my family, I'd been told, give your father his father back. Give your father his daughter back. Give your mother her daughter back. Give your sister her sister back. Go give these people the truth. And so when I was there, I wound up being put on medical leave because I had actually injured my spine. And in a healthy family, the family unifies when someone passes away. And in a sick family, the defects exploded, my family exploded. And so for so many of these things that had happened, I had gotten to these moments just, shaking my fists at the sky, truly in relationship with God, really talking, being honest, being authentic, because I found that that is healing and right. And one of the things that I learned through all of this too, through all of these times, was God reliance. Because when I was going to meetings in Florence, and we had 5 English-speaking meetings a week, and I was hearing, 90 and 90, I thought, well, does that mean everybody dies on the Monday? What I needed to do was to rely more on the power than on meetings. And when I was going through all of these really tough times, and with my ex-fiance and the rest, all these affairs, I thought, well, why did he go back out? We were going to meetings together. Right? He was doing service. We were praying, meditating together. He was working with others. What happened? And it is my belief that it's really a matter of spiritual principles deep inside. And also, I've been having a whole bunch of affairs. And he had said, but one of the things was I had left a job because he had sent me a message, and this wasn't true. It was out of insanity and cruelty. And I don't have any diseases. It's not a criticism of anybody who does. But he sent me a text telling me he had had a whole bunch of affairs and that he had given me AIDS. And I was so broken inside. That's one of the times that I left, and I had been picked up by a protege and I don't have it, but that is what happened. I separated from my body. I was just so overwhelmed. And I was picked up by a protege who brought me into the mountains of northern Italy. And she dropped me off there, and I was there for 4 days, and I was on the ground, you know, sort of with these gauges just smashed. You know, God, what is this? God, I don't understand. I thought we had a deal. And I had like a white rag, I don't know, with me, and I had a big red stripe on it, and I just started running up this mountain. And I got to the top, and a cloud was coming over me, like literally coming through me, and or all around me, and it was like passing through the cloud of unknowing. My relationship with spiritual detachment has been fundamental. It's not just that, but it's also learning how to die sober to be reborn. Because every single time rough stuff has happened, number one, I have not wanted to drink. In all of this that's happened, I have not wanted to drink. And that is a matter of being recovered at the level of the mind because of this program. So that no matter what happens, the idea that taking a drink is going to make this better doesn't even make the list. It goes, God, what can I do? God, how do I get out of this? I don't have the power. Show me. Carry me. I'm willing. And every time I've been knocked down, I've gotten up and gotten stronger. And I was in New York, and the family had exploded, and the stepmom ran away with Line ran away with the estate, and then the others are stealing. And you know what I learned? Was spiritual inheritance. Because it's all about spiritual principles today. There is nothing more important. There is nothing of greater value. And to be able to have a way of living that connects me to the infinite source of love, the infinite source of compassion, the infinite source of forgiveness, the infinite source of every spiritual principle I'm ever going to need in this life. And I am so grateful, because it is so much more than just going to meetings and than just not drinking and going to meetings, which wouldn't keep me sober anyway. It is a journey of adventure and purpose and meaning. And I'm going through all kinds of stuff right now. I've actually had 3 spinal injuries in the last 2 years. And I've learned a lot about non-chemical approaches to pain, like exercise and heat and temperature. And I thought, well, I've had all these people coming lately, asking for help. And I said, I don't know how to help all of these people. How am I going to have the time for it? I'm in meditation this morning. And I thought, and it was in my dreams. And I got inspired, and I wound up making a bunch of phone calls. And tomorrow, 7 of us, seven people are going to come, and we're going to go through this book, because we're going to make it work, because God will provide. So I'm really, really grateful to be here tonight with all of you, and it is such an inspiration to connect to your hearts, to connect to people who are really living this deal, and those that are joining us on a path that is something I wouldn't want to miss for anything in the world. So thank you.
Epic. Every week. Our speaker comes from far away. They take time out of their own life and their own expense to come here. Please take a moment to form a line and thank them. It means a lot to them to let them know that they've been appreciated for their effort. Next week we have Sarah R. coming down from Boston. It's going to be a treat again. No smoking on the church property. Please help us finish up some of that food. And are we going to Perkins afterwards? I think we might. Half off appetizers. I still don't get a cut of that. We got life is so unfair. We got a nice way of closing if you care to join us, and thanks for coming out.